Welcome back to the Hero Gauntlet. In today's matchup, we have the one and only true king of Camelot, wielder of Excalibur, King Arthur. And he's going up against the terrifying, the petrifying, but incredibly beautiful Medusa. So let's look at the cards of each of these heroes. First, we have King Arthur with that amazing boosting attack ability, be able to make that Excalibur and make it a nice 9 value attack. As well as Merlin being able to move those fighters around the board with Command the Storms. Now let's look at Medusa's deck. She has that amazing ability where she can deal damage to any fighter in her zone. Gaze of Stone has the potential to deal a ton of damage, as well as Second Shot and Momentary Glance, which could deal another 2 damage to anyone in her zone. Now this is how King Arthur's doing so far. 2 wins. Let's see if we can make it the 3rd. So here we are at the very beginning of the match. We're playing on Sarpedon, which is Medusa's home map. And you can see in my opening hand, I have that nice feint with a few skirmishes and Excalibur, which is actually quite helpful at this stage in the game, right at the very beginning. I placed Merlin right on smack dab on one of those tri-colored spaces as I let Medusa kind of move over into the pink, which is one of the most dangerous zones that we have here. Looking into this, I see that Medusa's coming in and attacking King Arthur right away. I have 2 skirmishes. I have the potential to block a lot of damage. Is this going to be a big meaty attack starting off? I don't know. We're going to have to find out here. I'm hoping that skirmish will at least give the opportunity to King Arthur to move. And it's a second shot. And she boosts it with a hiss and slither to make it a meaty 6 value attack, which deals 2 damage to King Arthur, but he's able to block a good chunk of that with the skirmish. And now it goes on to King Arthur's turn. Looking at my hand, I have regroup now. I have a feint and a skirmish. I do have some options on defense, but I definitely want to make sure I have a little bit more options here. So I think what I want to do is use that regroup to hopefully pull out some other defenses from Medusa. And now that I have Merlin, I can actually use this at a distance. So I decide to leave Merlin there, potentially leaving him in her zone. I go after one of the Harpies in hopes that they won't defend. But of course she defends with the regroup, which will give her 2 cards and give myself 1. Again, another attack card. It's looking okay for a hand right now. I really don't have an opportunity to jump forward. Merlin gets hit with that instant damage at the beginning of her turn, and she comes right at Merlin. Now, I have a feint and a skirmish here, and kind of looking at a few things, I kind of noticed that it could be a meaty attack coming my way. I have skirmish to allow Merlin to at least get out of her zone before her next action. So I kind of am contemplating right now if I want to do it to at least get out of her zone. So I go for the skirmish, my highest defense card, against the Gaze of Stone, which was kind of helpful in some ways. I was able to possibly mitigate another attack from Medusa, and I'm able to at least get Merlin into that red zone within the back there, at least to keep him safe in the distance. She keeps maneuvering her Harpies around, creating that nice shield that she can make with them. As now I'm just trying to fill up my hand. I'm just kind of desperate for good cards right now. I do have that nice Excalibur Noble Sacrifice that I can use as a combo. I just need to be able to get King Arthur right next to her to do it, and that Harpy in the way is going to be trouble. So she keeps up the shield while she throws one of the Harpies at me. I know this could be a Clutching Claws or a Hounds of the Mighty Zeus. So I end up using the feint in hopes that I can, cancel one of those cards. But they throw a dash at me. This was actually really bad for me. The fact that I still took a damage and I wasn't able to negate an effect that would have been incredibly drastic on my part. That was a really coordinated interaction that just did not work well for me right there. I have to figure out how I'm going to get out of this kind of situation. I decided to go with Swift Strike to at least be able to move King Arthur afterwards, if I can go right after her. And luckily for them, they have Clutching Claws, which is another big problem for me. I know that this is going to be difficult for me to be able to maintain, because of the fact that King Arthur just gets walloped whenever he has to discard cards. I'm down to 3 in my hand, and now I can move up to 4 spaces. I decide to actually just get out of the way at this point. I just don't want to be targeted anymore by her at this point. So I kind of move into the background over there. Let's see. We got Medusa kind of moving her harpies around again. She goes after Merlin, staying in the background, but as well as, staying as a intimidating presence, because if I go into the pink zone, I'm going to be able to get hit by her for free at the beginning of her turn. So she goes after me with her harpy. I decide to have Merlin not defend it, knowing that the worst damage that could be dealt is 4, which he would be able to survive. And they're able to get 2 cards off the regroup. It's a decent interaction for them because they get the card draw, but for me, I don't take a lot of damage to Merlin, so he's able to stay on the board for a little bit longer. I am able to get a Aid the Chosen One at this point in time. I'm kind of trying to figure out where I want to put Merlin, and I decided to try to put him within the pink to keep the pressure onto Medusa, because I just want to be able to deal some damage to her at this point. And finally, I'm able to break through her defenses with Aid the Chosen One to deal 2 damage. The only thing that stinks is that the feint stops me from drawing cards, which, takes away some more options available to me at this point in time. She deals the auto damage at the top of the next round, and she goes right after Merlin, potentially trying to get rid of my assistant. I throw down regroup, and she just threw a regroup at me, so she regroup baited Merlin, and it worked. But I do find myself at opportunity to avoid another attack from her, so I go into the yellow space, and she's able to draw a card, at least from that interaction. She boosts her movement to get right up next to Merlin on that tri-zone space, which was probably one of my biggest flaws right there. Now she has incredible control over the map, and she is able to have a little bit of that high ground against me. I decided my turn to move Merlin a little bit back into the brown space and then move him into the red to avoid some of that auto damage that she can deal. She tries to trap me in there with the harpy, in which I kind of fell for that, to be honest, and goes right after King Arthur, ignoring Merlin altogether. King Arthur has a few options. I have the Divine Intervention, as well as Feint. Feint can be useful right now, especially if she's going to be throwing a second shot at King Arthur. So I had to think about, what are the potential types of attacks that are coming at me. I kind of look at how many cards are in her hand. I kind of thinking it could be a second shot, if considering she had about 5 cards in her hand. Ends up being a Gaze of Stone. That's not a terrible interaction to cancel that, to be honest. I actually think that worked out decently for me. Just mitigating any type of damage is going to be helpful. But Medusa has been incredibly aggressive. And it's been really difficult because when you're really aggressive against King Arthur and you're taking cards out of his hand, he really loses his effectiveness at this point in time. So then I go after that harpy, thinking I might be able to win this combat to draw 2 cards. And yet again, another feint comes out, canceling another one of my card draw cards. This is difficult. This is probably the worst situation I could be in. I don't have any cards in my hand. Medusa is going to keep coming at me. Luckily, I don't end my turn in her zone. She's going to have to use an action to get there. But I'm kind of lowering, kind of low on defenses at this point. I have to use Divine Intervention, thinking that she might have some big things under her sleeve. She goes with a dash against me, which is not, the worst thing that can happen. I was able to mitigate all that damage. But now I have the 5 movement. I decided to go back into the red when I really could have just ran away from her into the green to really force her to move out into that area if she really wanted to get to me and boost more. I decide to go into the red to stay somewhat nearby. With Merlin, I'm just trying to survive with him, and I end up just using my turn to fill up my hand. She comes at me again. Like I said, Medusa was incredibly aggressive. I was struggling so much to keep up with all these attacks. She goes in with that nice snipe card that I was able to block all the damage from, but still, I'm leaving myself kind of open for more attacks because I can't keep my card count in my hand. That hand count is definitely staying low, and that's something I need to work on going forward. King Arthur now coming in. He has Excalibur in his hand. He has the potential chance to do something here. But the thing is, am I going to have any defenses for her retaliation? I can't fully rely on just maneuvering to hopefully get a defense card. And knowing that, if I leave myself in that place, it's going to be really tough for me. So this was probably one of the most difficult decisions I had to make. I literally had to kind of think about what kind of defenses she might have in her hand. Hiss and Slither would be detrimental to me, even though I could probably throw Command of Storms out there to, use as just a dead card. But the problem is that I just... This was very difficult because I really wanted to deal the damage to her, but I knew that I needed to have defenses in my hand because just how aggressive that she's been. And looking at that, I maneuver and I get another scheme, so I didn't even have a defense to be able to use. And to be honest, I've been going through my defenses a lot. I really don't have many defense cards left over at this point. I maneuver again to at least get a momentous shift, which will enable me to at least block some damage that comes my way. I kind of, at this point in time, trying to figure out what choke and stuff like that I want to close off. I kind of thought if I went back one, I would not be able to get into another zone quite easily. And I would be very much distanced away from Merlin, who could be able to be useful as a shield. We're going to interrupt the match at this point in time for our halftime report. So some big takeaways from the match so far. We got a lot of damage blocked on King Arthur's side. Can he keep it up? As we see Medusa just starting to warm up with that direct damage and that combat damage. Alright, so now that we're returning back to the match, we got Medusa here who's boosting her movement to kind of get on the other side of the map where she's on that pink-yellow space, able to shoot across the water there at King Arthur. The only defense card I had in my hand was that Momentous Shift, which was able to block the Gaze of Stone, which was very helpful for us in that moment in time. So I think it was definitely worthwhile to draw that card last time to make sure to have that defense available. Now, Merlin has the opportunity now to at least deal some damage. I can't really be able to use Restless Spirits just on its own, so I am going to need to get Medusa and one of her harpies next to one another if I really want to dish out that damage to her even more so. At this point in time, I'm kind of contemplating where I want to put Medusa and her harpies. I decided to move the harpies over into the green zone and kind of leave Medusa there, which was probably a really bad decision on my part. I feel like I probably should have left Medusa over in the green zone or something like that. But I am able to defeat one of the harpies and be able to get card draw off of it, as well as deal 2 damage directly to Medusa. Medusa, on the other hand, will deal damage back to Merlin, which I probably could have avoided if I pretty much threw her into the green zone. And now that it's my turn, I see here that Medusa is sitting on that gangplank there, just basically waiting to see what I'm going to do. Staying just outside of my movement of 2, forcing me to have to boost a maneuver in order to get up to her. I was very tempted in order to do so, in order to use a boosted Excalibur against her. She only had a few cards in her hand. I felt a little bit more safe to do so. The problem is that I didn't have any defense cards in my hand. I needed defense cards in order to withstand some of the damage that she would throw at me. And I think it was just a little bit more precarious than I think I needed to be at this point in time in the match. I decided to use Prophecy to hopefully get some defense cards in my hand, which I pretty much saw all 4 of them are potential defense cards. And then I pretty much threw Momentous Shift on top of the deck just because it's a definitely more worthwhile card at this point in the game. Especially against, Medusa, especially with that, Holy Grail not really doing much at this point. We have a Harpy coming after me. I decided to feint it and cancel it. I have the Hounds of Mighty Zeus thrown at me. I still take 2 damage from the attack, which is kind of devastating, to be honest. And I was able to cancel her movement to get away, but it just wasn't that much of an impactful feint as much as I was hoping for. I do have 2 Momentous Shifts in hand. I think I've been trying to save those for some big attacks against Medusa. And now I start to move Merlin and King Arthur towards the shore. I'm hoping that I can at least get within attack range and be able to become much more of a threat to her and be a little bit more aggressive against her at this point in time. We've burned through more than half of our deck already. I need to be able to get some damage onto her. The Harpy intervenes and decides to attack King Arthur right on the ship. I feel like I should have jumped right onto that choke point. I don't know why I held back. I feel like I was trying to avoid being attacked by Medusa because of my lower number of defenses. But this is where I feel like I could have been a little bit more aggressive here because I just decided to take the meat of the damage from this attack, knowing that it was mostly going to be a high 4, just to save some defenses against Medusa, especially now that she still has, I think, a few second shots available to her, even though the Gaze of Stones have either been all used or close to all used at this point in time. So I'm kind of weighing my options at this point. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I'm able to get Merlin within her zone to at least throw a Momentous Shift at her, in which she responds with a feint. So here we go. I'm chipping away at Medusa. I'm not able to really get a lot of big damage on her, as she's able to really just play the right defense cards at the right time, where I feel like I was the complete opposite. So she deals the damage to Merlin, able to wear him down to 3 health left, and she starts to maneuver yet again towards King Arthur and has the Harpy attack me. Now I know that the Harpy might have another Clutching Claws in their hand. I have to really decide, what am I going to defend with, so I end up going with the Holy Grail, which is probably the worst decision I could have made at that point. I guess I could have taken the 3 damage and then just used the Holy Grail on a later turn. I just think mitigating that 1 damage at that point in time was kind of useless. I get rid of a Bewilderment. Don't think it's going to be that big of a deal for me at the current time. Hoping that Lady of the Lake would be a really good combo for me, going in between things with Excalibur. I don't know. I think at this point I was kind of starting to give up because I was running out of defenses. I was trying to keep pressure on her with Merlin, but she was just able to get those defenses up just like that with that 4 value Hiss and Slither to just get that 1 damage just chipping away at her. I really need to get like a big damage dealing attack at this point in order to put some threat. She's able to get another damage onto Merlin, wearing him down, and soon I'm gonna actually lose him as a sidekick here unless I do something. So she goes and attacks King Arthur, who's on the pink space. I can't defend it at this point, and she hits me with a boosted second shot, which deals 6 damage, leaving me with a measly 1 health. Basically dangling, for any sort of, comfort. That would have been a perfect time to actually use the Holy Grail, but of course I didn't know that at that point in time. I didn't play my cards right very well in this matchup. I definitely could have done much better. Merlin goes onto that Tri-Zone space. I kind of go back and forth because right now I'm trying to figure out how am I going to get to Medusa with King Arthur within one turn to possibly deal some big damage. She has no cards in hand. This is very opportunity. It's a big opportunity for me that I really don't think I actually took advantage of. I feel like I should have went right after her, dealt a big boosted attack against her, and she just played the long game at this point. She was trying to play the fatigue game. She, threw herself on the far corner of the map as she had one of the harpies kind of staying nearby to cause a ruckus. And now she has 2 cards in her hand, which she could, possibly use to defend. This is where I really started to, think about where are my options here? What can I do here? And I decided to actually move Medusa over into this other side of the map and just move Merlin right beside her in the hopes that I can actually deal some damage. And all I had left was Swift Strike. All I had was the opportunity to deal 3 damage, so I ended up going after the Harpy with King Arthur in the hopes that I might be able to move the 4 spaces to get out of her zone, or get potentially out of the zone that she can on her next turn. But that Clutching Claws was just enough to stop me, and I had to get rid of my last noble sacrifice. And I end up throwing myself here over onto the red space, and just to try to stay out of her, zone, the potential chance of attacking me, she goes after me again with the Harpy. The Harpies have been her biggest asset during this match. I had no defenses left. The damage is dealt. The game is over. And King Arthur is defeated by Medusa.